The bigger story that Taylor Swift is trying to tell in her songs involving Maddie Healy is not a romantic one. Maddie is neither the villain nor the long-awaited true love that people like to assume, but rather a supporting character in Taylor's story about the longest toxic relationship she's ever had, the one she has with the public. To understand this, to understand the nature of Taylor's relationship with Maddie, we need to look at 5 songs from the Torture Poets department, starting with the song How Did It End? By the way, I'm Mary, and this is part of my deep dive of the Torture Poets Department album, where I talk about the meaning of the songs and why I think this album has some of Taylor's best songwriting to date. My perspective is one of a songwriter and a former English teacher. The song How Did It End doesn't actually involve Maddie, but it's important because it reveals to us how Taylor felt about the public reception of the news of her breakup with Joe. And that's going to give us context later when Maddie does enter the picture. In this song, Taylor comments on the public's obsession with dissecting often the most painful parts of her personal life for entertainment. Let's first dive into the lyrics, and then we'll talk about the song's significance. Something to keep in mind as we go through the lyrics is that in this song, Taylor writes from multiple perspectives. The song starts with verse 1, line 1. We hereby conduct this post-mortem. A post-mortem is an autopsy, where a dead body is examined to determine the cause of death. The metaphor of a dead body here is referring to the deceased relationship of Taylor and Joe. How do we know it's Joe? Because she goes on to list in verse 1 and verse 2 the various obstacles that led to the demise of this relationship. And they're all things she's written about on this album and on previous albums. For example, line 2, he was a hothouse flower to my outdoorsman. Taylor is making a comparison between Joe and herself. A hothouse is basically a greenhouse, where plants are grown in a controlled environment and protected from outside elements. An outdoorsman is someone who not only enjoys the outdoors, but is also equipped or at least willing to deal with what comes with it. The connotation of a hothouse flower is kind of being fragile and preferring comfort, while an outdoorsman is hardy and prefers adventure. A hothouse flower lives in a literal bubble, while an outdoorsman prefers freedom. This difference between her and Joe is something we've all witnessed throughout their relationship when it comes to how they live their lives as public figures. Line 3. Our maladies were such we could not cure them, meaning the problems we had, we could not fix them. Line 4. And so a touch that was my birthright became foreign. Here she's describing when the relationship had fundamentally broken down. To me, Taylor is someone who is very sensual and physically affectionate. If we look at songs that she wrote at the beginning of the relationship on the Reputation album, she wrote a lot about the strong physical connection that they had. So when the privilege of a touch becomes foreign, it speaks to the breakdown of not only physical intimacy, but also emotional intimacy. Her partner becomes a stranger. This sentiment is reflected in other songs like My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys, when she says, with tears streaming down her face, but you should have seen him when he first got me. Taylor has made it undeniably clear on this album and on previous albums that the breakdown and the eventual breakup between her and Joe was devastating to her. Now we arrive at chorus 1, and she switches from speaking as herself to speaking as the public. Come one, come all, it's happening again. Come one, come all is a phrase they used to say at circus sideshows to get people to come watch. There's a reason why we don't see them anymore, because sideshows were incredibly dehumanizing. They used to just put on display people that society considered different or odd, people with physical deformities or what we know today to be just terrible medical conditions. So here in How Did It End, as Taylor is recounting the painful experience of a breakup, what happens? Come one, come all. The public is called to gather and gawk at her as a form of entertainment. The impact of this kind of treatment of her by the public can be seen in the song Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, when Taylor says, I was tame, I was gentle, till the circus life made me mean. This actually made me realize what a powerful statement Taylor makes by starting the song with, we hereby conduct this post-mortem. Because the scene that Taylor sets up for the whole song is a public autopsy. She's equating the fascination with dissecting her breakup with a public autopsy for the purpose of entertainment. When we think about that imagery, that's incredibly disturbing and twisted. And we can understand how such an experience strips someone of their humanity. Taylor continues in chorus 1, it's happening again. To me, this could be the public speaking, saying, come watch, the sideshow is happening again. Or it could be Taylor speaking, and she's saying it's happening again as a lead-in to the next line, the empathetic hunger descends. Either way, it's pointing to the fact that this is not the first time that the public has descended upon a major event in Taylor's life in a feeding frenzy, specifically an event that's deeply painful to her. The phrase empathetic hunger is so effective in communicating how Taylor sees and feels about the public's interest in her personal life. Empathetic means being able to understand how someone else might be feeling, and it implies a certain level of sensitivity or care for the person. But paired with hunger, it takes on a sinister connotation. In the song But Daddy I Love Him, Taylor is much more explicit and refers to the public as vipers dressed in empaths' clothing, which is a version of the saying wolves dressed in sheep's clothing. Taylor is commenting on how people express interest in her personal life as if they actually care about her, when in fact they're really only there to indulge in her pain. And of course, Taylor is not talking about everyone in the public. She's not talking about fans and people who treat her with a level of dignity and respect with which we all expect to be treated. She's specifically talking about people who are judgmental and exploitative. Here in How Did It End, she completes chorus 1 with, "We'll tell no one except all of our friends. We must know how did it end." Did you catch that Taylor snark? If you ever watch Taylor in interviews or extended conversations, you'll see that she's incredibly sharp-witted and can be quite snarky, especially when she's commenting on someone's bad behavior. To me, that's what she's doing here with the line, "We'll tell no one except all of our friends." She's calling out the public's bad behavior by speaking as the public in mockery. She's commenting on how the public's interest in the ending of her relationship is really only for the sake of gossip. Now we move on to verse 2, where Taylor again speaks as herself and continues to recount what went wrong in the relationship. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go over each line, but the one thing I do want to point out is how the theme of betrayal has been part of Taylor's writing about her relationship with Joe for like 4 albums now. She used to write about it more discreetly, masking it with metaphors and fictionalization, but on this album, she's been much more direct, with lines like what we have here in verse 2, line 3, "fell victim to interlopers' glances," meaning one of them succumbed to the temptations of an intruder in their relationship. The reason why I want to point this out is that it gives us an idea of how emotionally tumultuous, complex, and painful this relationship might have been for Taylor. Which makes the public's reaction to her breakup even more hurtful when she says next in the pre-chorus, "Soon they'll go home to their husbands, smug because they know they can trust him, then feverishly calling their cousins." The public's reaction to her breakup is not sympathy, but rather smugness, which is a byproduct of judgment, and feverish gossip. Then Taylor switches perspective again and speaks as a public in chorus 2. I just love how this song plays out like a script, because the way Taylor switches between speaking as herself and speaking as a public creates a visual scene that puts me, the listener, right in the middle of this tension between these two characters. So on one hand, we have Taylor, who's mournfully recounting the ending of her relationship, and on the other hand, we have the character of the public that's basically saying, "Ooh, tell us more." By creating this contrast, Taylor is showing us how insensitive the public is to her pain. She then really drives this point home in the bridge, which to me encapsulates everything she's trying to say in this song. She writes from both perspectives and begins by speaking as the public. "Say it once again with feeling, how the death rattle breathing, silence as the soul was leaving." Meaning, tell us again, but this time with more emotion, make it tragic. It's as if the public wants to see her fall apart because it would be more entertaining. Then she switches perspective and speaks as herself, seemingly to satisfy the public's demand. "The deflation of our dreaming, leaving me bereft and reeling, my beloved ghost and me, sitting in a tree, DYING." What a way to show us the callousness of the public. This is one of Taylor's strengths as a songwriter. She sticks to the adage, show, don't tell, meaning she didn't just tell us, "I was heartbroken and people were cruel and that hurt me even more." Instead, she showed us by creating these scenes and dialogue so that we can witness and better connect with her experience. I'm going to stop here because there's so much more we can say about this song, but in the context of our conversation about the bigger story that Taylor's trying to tell in her songs involving Matty Healy, the significance of this song is that it gives us an idea of where Taylor was at emotionally after her breakup with Joe, especially when it comes to her relationship with the public. Because her relationship with the public is what she really addresses in those songs with Matty. So the takeaway from How Did It End is that when Taylor was mourning her breakup with Joe, she felt that the public didn't care at all about her grief, but instead was only interested in consuming her pain with an insatiable appetite for gossip and entertainment. We have to imagine how dehumanizing and isolating that may be for someone, and that's what we have to keep in mind when we look at our next song, Guilty as Sin.